So that was President Moon Jae-in at the UN General Assembly there. Semin, let me start with you. You followed President Moon around on his most recent trip to the US, including, I believe, the UN General Assembly there as well. You weren't there with him for North Korea, but you are following his movements closely at the media's press center as well. It's really been quite a busy schedule. What, for you, has been the highlights of his schedule over the last few weeks?
Right, no doubt it's been a non-stop diplomacy for President Moon Jae-in over the past couple of weeks. And two things I want to point out. One, getting an absolute confirmation from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un saying of his commitment to putting down the regime's nuclear weapons, and which is leading to a round 2 of that Sentosa meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. And another is officially confirming once and for all that the related parties are all on the same page when it comes to declaring the official end of the Korean War. And yes, President's schedule in both Pyongyang and New York clearly reflects such a push, with President Moon has gaining support for his administration's drive for a nuclear-free Korean peninsula and reaffirmed the world that the ending of the Korean War in the near future, which was the first time that the South Korean president had brought that issue up on the UN stage.
So, Professor Kim, let me turn to you now. So, President Moon has put a lot on his shoulders trying to mediate between North Korea and the US. With his recent 2 trips, do you think he succeeded in his aims to try and be that mediator?
Yes, the US, North Korea, they re-entered into the negotiations. 2 ministers of foreign affairs, Pompeo and Arirang, met together. And Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang is now scheduled, maybe sometime near, maybe next week or something. The story is that before the Pompeo's visit to Pyongyang, which was canceled last time, the U.S. kept on asking the North Korea to submit the declaration of its nuclear capabilities, which was rejected by North. And in return, the U.S. requested the complete destruction of the Yongbyon facility, nuclear facility, which was also, rejected by North Korea. But this time, by North-South Korean leaders summit meeting, there was, agreement about how to proceed in denuclearization. If there is some corresponding measures by the United States, North Korea would be willingly to destroy its Yongbyon facilities. Of course, maybe the U.S. would not think it's enough, because the U.S. has been requesting the declaration of nuclear, capabilities by the North first before it gives some measures to the North. So we don't know what details would be met by 2 sides, but at least the President Moon successfully made 2 parties come to the negotiation again.
So they're back in negotiation, but as you said, details are quite short at the moment. So I mean, those details seem to be a concern not only with the experts, but with, I think, the reporters there as well when you were there. I mean, what were some of the concerns that you felt that the foreign press and the Korean press had there when they were seeing President Moon and President Trump in their negotiations and such?
I think and time again are a lot of the reporters' expectations of having the detailed discussions, a detailed plan from the leaders of both South and North Korea and the United States president had not been met quite efficiently till this point. But the fact that such a development on North Korea is taking place in such a short amount of time already is an assertion and an indication to a lot of the people, including the presidential press corps, that perhaps the process on bringing the Korean peninsula closer to peace is on the right track. So some of the presidential press pool who had accompanied President Moon both to Pyongyang and to New York this time say that the general atmosphere during the summits with respective leaders in both sides had been held in a very positive manner, so to speak. But concerns, though, have kept coming in from the conservative media in the U.S., still skeptical of whether the deal between both Pyongyang and Washington would unfold in a positive direction. So that interview President Moon had held with the conservative-leaning Fox News during his stay in New York this week, it was seen as an effort to quell such looming skepticism head-on. And the responses following that interview, of course, added to the view of him being the ultimate mediator, with President Trump even calling him the only person who can solve this problem.
So I'm not sure if you saw that Fox interview. He tried to quell some of those concerns there. But do you think he can, President Kim, do you think he was able to convince those skeptics that, progress was being made and that the differences between North Korea and the U.S. on the details can be bridged at some point?
I don't know. I haven't been to Washington, D.C. after his visit to New York. So I don't know how the elites in D.C., policymakers and experts in D.C., their opinions changed. I don't know. But I think at least it clearly changed the atmosphere in South Korea. A lot of conservatives, politicians, I don't think their criticism has, is continuing. Their criticism has pretty much got weaker after, after Moon Jae-in's visit to New York. But I think, very recent, expert of U.S. who was visiting Seoul met the same period that, Moon Jae-in was visiting in New York. He was still very critical about the situation. Not critical about President Moon Jae-in, but critical about Kim Jong-un and Trump. President Trump would make the U.S. forces in Korea very much in a risky situation. If things get better, the threats of North Korea gets much weaker. This process of denuclearization and peace process continues. President Trump might think that U.S. forces in Korea staying in South Korea would not be necessary. That's first concern he gave to me. A second concern is that Kim Jong-un realistically not possible and intentionally not willing to give up his nuclear weapons. So those two things were the concerns that the elites in D.C. had.
Yes, for example, as well, in last week's meeting between the two Koreas, the North Korea agreed to take further steps towards denuclearization, but only if the U.S. make corresponding measures. Despite all this progress that has been made in the last few days about the second summit between Trump and Kim, there's still the details about what those corresponding measures are haven't really been fleshed out, it seems, not in public anyway. Is that a concern at all, do you think?
I think Pompeo is going to Pyongyang. And that means that they almost finished coordinations about what the corresponding measures should be and what kinds of denuclearization measures by the North Korea has to be given to the United States. Now, by the agreement between North and South Korean leaders, what has come out of the agreement is that North Korea would be destroying Yongbyon nuclear facility, but that measure is not the same value as the peace declaration. So I think there should be some coordinations between two things. If there comes up the peace declaration as the corresponding measures, I think North Korea has to give something more than just destroying the Yongbyon facilities. And I think they come up with agreement what those two things should be because Pompeo is going to Pyongyang.
So that's the next question I was going to ask you, Semin. So what comes next? Obviously, we know Pompeo is going to Pyongyang. What else do we know that is going to happen next?
I mean, now that President Moon Jae-in had come to have done his part as a mediator, keeping North Korean leader Kim and U.S. President up to date on the latest process, now it's more like waiting to see what would unfold. Like Professor Kim had just said, we know that Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will be visiting North Korea next month, which begins next week already, while hinting at another beginning, saying that the world stands at the, quote, dawn of a new day in relations with the North. So many are watching to see whether Pompeo will come out of his third official visit as the top diplomat of U.S. with some of the details as to when or where the two leaders will be having their round two of the summit.
So the round two of the summit, President Trump and Kim could be having at some point. Pompeo has said it could happen in October, but more likely to happen in November. What do you reckon, Professor Kim? Where are you going to place your bet on? Which date would you place your bet on for the next? For the next Trump-Kim summit.
Well, but maybe it would be good for President Trump if he hold that meeting before the midterm election. Kim Jong-un and President Trump meet together with a very good successful outcome about the denuclearization, stipulated in their agreement, it would be good. I mean, help out the victorious result in the midterm election. But realistically, the schedule is very tight. I mean, early October next week, possibly, Pompeo is going to Pyongyang, and he comes back 3 weeks. They have to have at the summit meeting, which I don't think is possible, realistically possible. So I think, as Secretary Pompeo has said, maybe it's more likely that they will hold that meeting after the midterm election, maybe early November. Yeah, I think so.
So there are certainly some hurdles to overcome. But Semin, I understand that South Korea, on their part, they're not going to be staying still while this is happening, while they wait for U.S. and North Korea talks to continue. I mean, can you tell us what the South Korean government is now going to do, what steps they're going to take next?
Right. While President Moon Jae-in was busy brokering a deal between the two sides, North Korea and the U.S., the staffers here in South Korea had been busy getting the ball rolling in terms of carrying out the promises that the two leaders of the two Koreas had been making in the past couple of months. The Committee on Carrying Out the Inter-Korean Joint Declarations, including the first encounter in April, held their own first meeting today after having changed their name to the Inter-Korean Summit Declaration Fulfilling Committee, and chaired by the Summit Preparatory Committee Chair Im Jong-suk, who also doubles a role as the Presidential Chief of Staff. The committee had gone over ways to kickstart some of the promises made by the leaders while making sure that the processes run smoothly. And of course, there cannot be a better proof of North Korea's change of heart and denuclearization than seeing those promises being carried out by the two Koreas.
Professor, what do you see South Korea and President Moon's role now that he's successfully mediated between the North Korea and the U.S.? I mean, what does South Korea need to continue doing?
Well, I think for now, President Moon has to see how things evolve between the U.S. and North Korea about the denuclearization issues. That's something that has to have some kinds of outcome, which would lead to some corresponding measures by the United States, whether it would be the peace declaration or some other measures, which is good for the two countries' relations. Second thing, I'm kind of worrying about the role of China. I think maybe yesterday, Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that China prefers going back to six-party process, which is very remote idea in reality right now. There is a bilateral deal between Trump and Kim, and China thinks that six-party process is good because China does not want to be passed out of isolated from the current move towards denuclearization. So this kind of position of China is making me worry about the role of China in the future. Being a spoiler rather than, a positive, contributor to the denuclearization issues. So this kind of things, we have to deal with China, talk and make more diplomatic efforts with China so that China would be moving towards a positive role rather than negative role.
I mean, but why do you think China suddenly has gotten involved? Because China so far has kind of stayed out of things and let the U.S. and North Korea sort it out by themselves. Are they trying to be a spoiler now? Is it now that just the timing, do you think?
I think, maybe China would not be involved in the peace declaration, but I think ultimately China would be a member for the peace treaty. Peace treaty is not just a peace treaty. It has a lot of articles. They have to come up and talk about and discuss and what should be the articles of peace treaty. And China definitely would like to put in the contents that would be good for the interest of China. For example, China might think that, okay, now the peace in the Korean Peninsula, why do we need U.S. forces in South Korea? And the peace treaty situation would make the U.S. and China conflict again in the Korean Peninsula, which is no good for the current situations of the Korean Peninsula. And that kind of thing is something that we need to deal with from now on.
We'll have to keep a close eye on that. Well, that's where we'll wrap things up. Thank you both for coming in, and we appreciate your time and your insights.
Always a pleasure.